This is a podcast with Leslie Randall from Better Homes and Gardens and Chris Airy from Compendium Solutions. Welcome to our show, Leaders with Suspicions. I hope you enjoy.
So, Leslie, how's your day been so far?
Well, so far so good. I mean, I'm 6 feet above ground, so that's all I can ever hope for, right?
Right, the only way's up, yeah. So, before we dive in, can you tell me about what you're currently doing? And
Yeah, absolutely. I've got kind of my role has actually shifted somewhat. So previously I was the COO of Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate, the Good Life Group. And we had started in 2015 with 12 people. And we are now at over 350, less than 10 years later. So we've grown substantially. We are number 3 in the state of Nebraska. And we're ranked within the number 5 nationally for our production. And so the evolution of that has kind of changed from building a structure to now I'm building growth and looking at opportunities on how we can expand versus being in the day-to-day operational, which is where I really spent the bulk of my time, making sure that all of our processes and procedures and that the machine was working the way that it needed to work. And so now that that's been in place, my role is now expansion. And we have, I would say 2 or 3 different side ventures that I'm pretty excited about. I'm going to New York next week to make a pitch to one of our Anywhere Real Estate's top producers for a job or a new business venture that we're doing that targets senior living. So we've got kind of our hands in a couple of different things when it comes to residential real estate, and I'm expanding into commercial and property management.
so what's the normal day look like for you?
A normal day is not necessarily normal, and that's what I love about real estate is because it's always going to be different and it always keeps me on my toes. I learn a lot almost every day. So it takes a lot of general knowledge and experience and then taking what the situation is at hand and modifying how the results are going to be and the direction and strategy you take with each client and each agent. So my day is pretty unroutine. I kind of am dictated by my email and my phone. But typically, a normal day for me is going to start with getting the kids rolling out of bed and at school, and then getting into what some of my market stats are, what the industry has been doing, both locally and nationally, and then tackling some of these projects. And so, since we're kind of writing the SOPs for these new ventures, a lot of it just has to be dictated by the direction that what needs to happen right now, but also what am I looking for the next steps so that I can be 2 steps ahead and looking around the corner. So I'm kind of always thinking about real estate. I'm always rolling things around. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning and suddenly I'm up and working on something that had just kind of popped through my head. So it could be on a regular day, I get up at 6 and work out, or it could be that I get up at 10 o'clock and I don't shower and go straight into my computer. So it varies very specifically, but I think that not having a daily routine is both good and bad because you don't have something that dictates your schedule. So nothing's predictable. So my days are very much open. Some days are busy, some days are not. But you've got to roll with the punches, and whatever comes up, you have to be prepared to tackle it.
Right, so before we go back to your business, why don't you tell me a little bit about your journey? How did you get to this great role you're in an interesting business?
Yeah, I've actually, since I was little, my parents instilled in me that you can go for whatever you want, but make sure that you have a business background, no matter what. So it was like, if you want to be an artist, you want to be an engineer, you want to be a plumber, go for it. But business puts food on the table. So that has always been instilled in my mind is I want to get into business. So when I was 16, I started working at Remax. So I have been in real estate since I was a teenager, and I thought it was the coolest job ever, right? Because I got to just answer phones, make flyers, and put signs in the ground. And that was that. But I also worked multiple jobs at the time too. So I got into real estate. I was serving tables, and I also was selling hunting and fishing licenses in the mountains of Colorado. So at a very young age, I always wanted to have my hands busy and doing things. So in 2005, I got my real estate license and started working at Keller Williams in Colorado. And so that was right before we had our big turn. So as soon as that happened, in 2008, I started doing and working in property management. Got married, started a family, and then in 2012, I decided it was time to get back into real estate, into selling homes. And that's when found my business partner, and we started a really small boutique. And actually, at the time, we only had two people and a bunch of property management and rentals. So it was a lot of development. Our offices were just shacks, basically. I mean, there was nothing beautiful about any of our offices, but we had a passion for filling a gap in the marketplace, which is a small boutique culture and agent-based brokerage. And that at the time, where brokerages were more company oriented and you kind of had to fall within the lines of what they said, was kind of unconventional. And we never realized it was going to take off as much as it did. And so when we onset in 2015, like I said, we had 12 people, and it exploded very, very quickly. In 1 year, we onboarded 70 new real estate agents, and we had one small little office, and then expanded. Now we have 5, and very Better Homes and Gardens-esque. So it's all very high quality and high culture, and making sure that we are serving our agents and our clients the best way possible. And so I grew up in this industry. So it was kind of, ride or die at that point, because we didn't have the capital to be able to hire more people. And so I had to just figure it out. It was not a question of, okay, well, I have too much workload on my plate, I need to hire more people. It was, okay, you have to figure out systems that can be more efficient so that you can do more work with less people. And so that's kind of where our operational then evolved, was because we had to go online. We were the first company in Nebraska to be fully online oriented, no actual paperwork. We just didn't have the capacity to accept it. It had to all be done in a very specific way. So I had to create that. And there wasn't anybody giving me the rule book. There wasn't anybody coming in and saying, okay, here's how you do it. It was, all right, how can we change the landscape of real estate so that it makes sense for our agents in the markets that they're dealing with right now? And how do I do it with a very limited budget? Because we had to invest in offices to be able to have a footprint in Omaha. And so we were investing in offices and not people capital. So it really was heavy on efficiency. And that's how I kind of grew up in the industry. And my first sales meeting, we had 12 people, and I was shaking in my boots. I mean, like, just stuttering, shaking, didn't know how to even conduct a meeting. And now I'll give talks to hundreds of people and not blink an eye. So the evolution was kind of trial by fire. I had to either do it or I was not going to be in the position that I was. And it was my baby. I grew this company from nothing, of course, with my business partner, because we are yin and yang. And I had such deep-seated passion to create something. And that was really, really fun. And it was really, really hard. In the midst of that, my husband passed away and I had a baby. So I had a 1-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a dead husband. And suddenly I was a widow. And we opened 3 offices that year, onboarded 70 agents. And so it was, the only option was, do you crawl in the corner in a ball, or do you get up, put your pants on, get up, dress up, and show up and be there? And that's what I chose.
Right. So quite a lot in what you just said there, and so much
Yeah.
to unpack. Yeah. Um, so it sounds like you never ever considered not doing real estate. Is that right?
It's always just been kind of ingrained in my, it could have been anything though, right? So when it comes to business and operations, a widget is a widget. And it just so happens to be that my widget is real estate sales. It could have been anything, but I always had a passion to do more and drive to whatever I did, I wanted to do it well and I wanted to do it right. So it could have been anything, but real estate was just so happened that it kind of fell into my lap, and I found a passion for it, even though I'm not good at sales. So I am the worst real estate agent ever. It gives me knots in my stomach thinking about one family with an inspection that's going wrong, that could change their life. And so I'd rather have 350 agents and manage the operational and give them advice on how to work with their families than working with one family and something going awry.
Okay. So you're either born this way to be determined, yeah, that's really coming across strongly, or you've also had some mentors and coaches and people that you've admired or modeled or so on. What have your influences been on that journey?
Yeah, my biggest influence has been my business partner, Tom. He's been critical in 2 ways. One is that he showed me how to really run a business and be able to negotiate the deals. And then I had to figure out how to make it happen. So he showed me that just because something's hard, we're not going to be scared about it. We're going to just dig in, roll up our sleeves, and we're going to figure it out. And then in another way, he never micromanaged me. He never questioned my decisions, never asked why I was doing something. If I said, Tom, this is what we need to do, he said, why? And then let's do it. So we butt heads, we have our fights for sure. But he's really shown me and given me the confidence to be able to take it, my personal self, next level within my business. Because if at any point in time he would have been critiquing or judgmental or criticized or second guessed any of the decisions that I was making operationally, that for me, I would have never been able to get to a point where we were able to grow the business the way it is. Because where he comes from is, it's kind of like he hunts it and kills it, and I cook it and clean it. So as long as we have that cohesiveness, we never have to question what the other person is doing. But without that, I would have never been able to get to the point that I am today.
Let's explore that a little bit, because there's loads of people who go into business with a partner and it all ends terribly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
people aren't who they thought they were. There was, people sometimes create the partner that they want, not the partner that is in front of them. Yeah. So tell me how you did that. Is it just that you're both two mature people who can read between the lines, or did you sit down one day and write a roles and responsibilities spreadsheet? I mean, how did you work out how you're going to work? Yeah.
Honestly, it was an evolution of sorts. And the way that Tom and I work, we have very different skill sets, very different skill sets, but our core and our beliefs are the same. So when you're both working with the same main focuses, it makes it so much easier to collaborate. But there's a lot of trust that has to happen, because you have to be in the trenches to really understand what that other person is capable of. But then you start to really learn where their qualities and where their weaknesses are. And so just to your point of saying, you want to create the partner that you want, not necessarily what's there. it's really critical to look at everything with transparency and go, okay, I'm not good at this. Like, I'm just going to say it. I'm not good at this. So you're really good at that. You handle that. And having that open conversation where the egos go away. Because once you get the ego into play, that's where things really start to fall apart and the threads start to unravel. It's really critical. And what I've experienced in general is finding people that are better at things than you are. That's that's building a great team and building a great partnership, is finding where you're lacking, not where you're good at. Because if you partner with someone that's good in the same ways that you are, because it resonates with you, it doesn't necessarily create a great business dynamic because there's still gaps that need to be filled. So it's all about taking a step back and me going, okay, I'm not good at social media. I'm not good at it. I love it. I want to be good at it, but I'm not. So I need to find someone that can be really great at that. And that also goes back to managing people, because I have realized over the years that I'm not great at managing people. I'm not a nice person, but I'm a kind person. But that doesn't resonate very well when it comes to managing people, because a lot of times there needs to be a finesse when it comes to the situations that happen. I've just never been good at that. I really tried hard for years because I am a people person and I connect with people very regularly. But when it comes to managing, I finally took a step back this summer, about 6 months ago, and said, I'm not good at this. I'm not developing the team in the way that I would like to or that they need. So I need to take a step back and let someone else drive the helm on that. And that I had to put my ego aside for that, because that's really hard when you say, okay, I'm going to step back from management and managing. I'm going to let you guys do it. And so but that's where I knew and I could feel like you have to have a really good sense of what your business is doing in order to know where it's going to go. It just has to. So that's where I said, I'm taking a step back. Someone else is better at this than I am. So
I think
let's.
that's profoundly perceptive, really, because when you're sort of founder and running a business, yeah, it's, people go around business books saying you should work on the business, not in it. And that's all very easy to say, but you're actually working in it and you have to be able to work on it and in it at the same time. So I think it takes some self-knowledge, really, to understand where the gaps are and what you need to do to build the organization. In the same way that if you were just an investor, you just dispassionately look at it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the first time I delegated was very, very hard, because if you think about it, I had my hand in everything when we were a small company, and I could have stayed that way, but that would have capped my growth. So it was hard to let a lot of things go and delegate and trust that another person is going to care for the business and the tasks at hand that needed to be done. But had I stayed there, the growth of the company would have suffered.
okay. So a few I'm going to wrap a couple of things together here, really, because you talked earlier about you were quite an industry leader in terms of being digital first. Yeah. And then later on in this conversation, you talked a bit about the people scale, meant that something different had to be done, right? So if I then ask you another question about how do you be competitive in the market, yeah? How are you going to grow, yeah? Which of those things, people or digital or something else, is going to be the foundation to that growth, or what's the balance between them?
I think both can be true. You have to you have to know your staff and your team well enough to know where someone's going to thrive. So there has to be, no one is ever going to fully adapt AI. You have different varying degrees of experience and even sometimes age demographics, and also business as usual. So sometimes you can't force AI and technology down your team's throat when you're built on a business of referral and people. But you can't be left behind when it comes to technology. You have to be knowing what your industry standards are, and you have to be knowing and researching and always learning what is next and around the corner or what could be. That's when it comes to Chat GPT, I immediately grasped onto it and started encouraging and educating my agents on, hey, it can write your listing profile for you. Just have your listing remarks done with it. And now it's moving so quickly that it's not a matter of like businesses and real estate agents, because I'm talking about both developing as a business and entrepreneur, but also as an independent contractor, being a real estate agent. It's not going to be technology replacing anything, but the agents that are not using technology and the businesses that are not utilizing the tools at hand are going to be left behind very, very quickly. So it's really critical that anyone that is in business has a general understanding of how to utilize and make your business more efficient using artificial intelligence. It is going to revolutionize how we do business. Already, the way that I use it's compounded my level of output 10 times just because I don't have to sit there and think about the basics. I can have something do it for me. So I think it's both. You have to nurture your people, but you can't force technology down their throats because then you're going to have a miserable team. We have had tried to implement more of a project management SOP when it comes to like ClickUp or Trello or any of these task management oriented softwares, and we just couldn't quite adapt it. It just didn't really resonate with the team. It was overcomplicated the way that we had set it up. And there also wasn't enough time to really refine what the processes are to set up what our goals were in utilizing the software. So that in and of itself made it difficult because if you're not using the technology in a very easy to understand way, especially for a team, when you have multiple people in and out, it has to be very simplified. And we didn't have that simplification process. And so it never just took traction. So we were still kind of mired down with the endless emails. Slack has been great for us. That's been a really nice tool to be able to have just kind of conversational, especially having multiple locations. But we know that there's a need for task management solution. But our business has grown so dynamically that trying to break it down into a simplified process is like, where do you start? I think that's the technology question in general. Is it's so vast. What do you adapt and what's your priorities when it comes to utilizing these new things? Because technology is coming out of our ears right now. There's an app and a new Chat GPT extension and add-on, and everything's AI powered. We've got Gemini, Bing is doing a really great platform with it. So, where do we grasp and take it so that we can really launch our business? What's going to be the most impactful?
I'm going to ask you that question then. Do you know yet what is the most impactful thing you could do next?
Well, right now I would say anything with Chat GPT just needs to be known. And we need to have a sense or at least an acknowledgement that AI is going to be taking over and making things next level. Because what we can't see around the corner is how it's going to change our marketplace. We don't know. Right now, it's in its infant form, even though it's exploded in the last 3 years, it's still expanding and it's getting smarter and smarter every day. So it's more of keeping a tally on what's happening and not necessarily what's happening in your industry. So that's something that I've utilized oftentimes throughout my career is I don't just stick with my industry. I start looking at other industries that might be doing something different that still has something that can resonate within the business or the operational field that could have some impact.
Okay, so you could start somewhere else. You could start with your operational challenges, yeah? So just tell me a little bit about how big is the business now? How many people, how many projects or clients, just give me a little feel for that. And then please tell me about your, top 3 operational challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are over 350 real estate independent contractors, and we have 15 staff and leadership and 6 offices now. So that does present some challenges operationally when you're spread out through different offices, because sometimes the efficiencies can get lost when you're not in an office working with someone that you can just quickly ask a question for. So really, the biggest operational challenge I would say would be almost always communication. Is how are we implementing a process? How are we communicating it? And how is it being executed? And how are we continuing to monitor it? So operationally, a big challenge has always not necessarily been the implementation process. It's been the ongoing execution of, you can't think about just how am I going to implement this new thing? You have to think about how is this going to look in 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years, and can we execute on it continuously? And does it achieve a goal? So operationally, it is difficult when you're a small team, but you're big. Our production this last year was over $1 billion in real estate sales volume. And we're ranked number 3 in the state of Nebraska. And like I said, we're, I think, 4 or 5 when it comes to units and volume nationally with Better Homes and Gardens. And so that presents some challenges when it comes to scalability. And so you can't be thinking about what I'm doing right now. If you're going to implement it, you have to think about, okay, if I have another 100 people, can I still do this successfully? And without having egg on my face of pushing something out there and then having to retract it or it not work. And there's been plenty of projects and items that I've pushed out there that have just flopped big time that I thought were going to be amazing. So it's all about knowing what your challenges are and then being able to look and think about what the future is going to hold.
So there's quite a lot in there. So you started with communication, and then you talked about the general issues with scaling, yeah. And you've got scaling if you've got independents working for you, yeah. The thing I would imagine there's a whole piece about them being on board or really on board. Are they exclusive to you, or can they work for other people as well?
Yeah, so they are exclusive to us, and that does provide its own challenges when it comes to the operational. And it does all tie together because communication is key. And so when you have independent contractors, they don't have to listen to what you say. They're running their own businesses. They're not going to follow your SOPs. They're not going to follow the direction, your business planning that you set up for them and help them, to achieve more. They're not going to do it. And you have different levels of agents in their experience. You have your brand new agents that know nothing. And then you have your experienced agents that know and think they know everything. And they all have their different operations and how they run their business. And then you have the other hand of it where we have, 15 staff and leadership. And so we have to be able to then, that small team runs operationally based on how you say. And ultimately, all it is to support the agent in their business. So you have to understand what the agent business is going through and what they experience on a daily basis. And you also have to know how you can support that agent. And the agent is our client, essentially. And the client of the agent is our client. So it's a lot of how can we support, what can we do to innovate, and how can we make sure that we're the best brokerage in town?
So you talked about Slack before, yeah? So you got Slack, I presume you got emails, and then you got your standard operating procedures. I presume you got a CRM as well, yeah? So despite all of that, communication remains a challenge. Can you bring that to life a little bit more for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Communication, even when it comes from the basis of communicating with your independent contractors, your team, and then them communicating with their client. So ultimately, we're a referral based business. And that was something that was kind of unique to our approach when we hit the market 10 years ago, because the others were doing more lead gen and relational marketing, and businesses weren't necessarily a key factor. And so we've built our business on relationships and referrals. And the agents that have come over to us have also adapted that and love and resonate with that. So our trainings and our information is mostly geared towards how can you build more of a relational business? And that comes down to communication. NAR came out with a stat, I think 2 years ago, that 93% of consumers said that they would use their same real estate agent again, but only 13% actually use their agent. And what does that boil down to? Communication. They stopped the communication after the transaction was over. And that's where a critical piece, and where you can tell if someone's going to be successful or not, is how they nurture that client after the transaction is over. Because once you're paid and you're moving on to the next deal, it's easy to forget about the people that you've serviced and helped before. So you have to know what your client, whether that be, from my perspective, whether that be my independent contractor, or from an agent perspective, that being their client, you have to understand that once the transaction is complete, how are you still maintaining that contact with that agent, so that, or with that client, so that you're top of mind, so that when someone says, I want to sell a house, they immediately go, oh, you have to use Leslie. Versus, my agent never talked to me after we closed. They were great up until that point, but I never heard from them again. So that communication is key in every single aspect. And it ties to operational, because you have to be able to put a system in place so that you can maintain contact and communication with your clients in a systematized way, so that you don't forget about anyone. And that's also where that technology piece comes into play too, is that you have to use the technology and the CRMs that are out there for you, because they're there to help support, so that you can take that mental, and also sometimes more of a burden of maintaining an Excel spreadsheet. Whereas now you can, if you really set up your CRM and you really make it work for you, it's going to triple your business, just because, and it's going to give you something to do every day. You know, we talked about what our daily tasks are. If your CRM is telling you what to do, you never have to think about, okay, I'm going to sit at the computer and get on Instagram for 3 hours, and then I'm going to work on some flyers and marketing because I don't know what to do with my day. If it's telling you that, hey, 6 months ago, your client moved into this house, it's time to reach out, then you've got that safety net in play, and you can expand on your business in different ways when it comes to the relational piece and having those conversations with clients.
I think that challenge of maintaining a relationship in a transactional market, where it can be irregular or can be over many years, yeah, is actually one faced by many business owners, yeah, from pensions and financial services and will reviews, etc. Yeah, I mean, there's many industries with the same problem. Yeah, so how do you make those reach outs and those contacts meaningful in some kind of way, rather than just, hi, I'm here still?
Yeah, just checking in. I'm just checking in.
Yeah.
Just checking in. That is a major downfall, because a lot of people don't know how or what to say. And so that puts a barrier in place. And so then they either dread making the call, which you can then feel, or it puts them in a place where they just don't want to do it. So when you reach out to people, the CRM is going to be, especially when it comes to scalability, because if you have hundreds of people in your CRM, and some of our agents will do 100 transactions in a year, you compound that, there's a lot of contacts that need to be made. And so your CRM is going to be the basis of where everything is kept. the best notes. You've got to make, I tell, when I train, I teach my agents, I say, make tags and categories for everything. If they have a dog, put a dog. If they have a dog and a cat, put pets. If they've got kids in elementary school, put elementary. Don't put kids. Are they wine lovers? Are they bourbon drinkers? What do they play pickleball on the weekends? Make a tag for all of it. Because then if you have something that comes up, let's say in the summer, we have a lot of outdoor activities because it gets really, really hot here. If you see a wine and cheese tasting and you get into your CRM and search people by wine, then you suddenly have a reason to reach out. You're calling and going, hey, did you hear about this festival? This is really cool. I think it would be right up your alley. By the way, how are your kids? Did Johnny finish baseball? How was the rest of his season? You have a reason to reach out based on the information that you have. And we all like to think that we can remember everything, but it's easy at first. But when you really have a robust business, you have to rely on your notes. And to your point, you said, this could resonate through any industry. And I see it all the time. Like, I think about my chiropractor, my hairdresser, my nail person, whatever the case may be. There's no level of follow-up. And I think about all of the times where I just didn't reschedule an appointment, but they never reached out. No one ever called me to say, hey, have your roots grown out? I haven't seen you in a while. Let's get you scheduled. So that can really go for any small business. It's so critical to gather data and to follow up. That could be the difference between going out of business and being in business, is if you're not reaching out. So it's critical to have a great CRM.
So tell me, what is your CRM? What system do you have?
It's called Moxie. So it's industry based within our franchise. And so it's very robust and it gears more towards the real estate agent and maintaining contacts. But ultimately, I always keep an Excel spreadsheet so that I can always have my data. So I'm a data nerd. So I like to, and I'm a digital hoarder. So I like to keep everything where I can access it.
So just before I come back to digital data hoarding in a minute,
Yeah.
could you tell me about, so you expect the agents, the independents, to use the CRM to keep in touch, or do you do that for them?
Yes and no. So they are responsible for themselves keeping in touch with their clients. And also that comes from a level of, we don't ever want it to appear that we're being competitive and trying to take clients away from our agents. That's never the space we want to be in. But ultimately, the CRM that's going to work is the one that they use. So we can provide as many technology and tools out as much as possible, but if they're not going to use it, it's not going to be beneficial. So if someone says that an Excel spreadsheet they've been tracking for 10 years, I say keep doing that. But if somebody doesn't have a system, I go, okay, you're going to love Moxie and you're going to love how it's going to elevate your business. And here's how to set it up. But it's anything when it comes to the CRM, it's just got to be whatever system that works for you, use and go for. Don't make it overcomplicated. I think too many people try to make it overcomplicated. And until you're at a level where you need to expand, keep it as simple as possible.
So let's talk about your data hoarding issue. So how do you know you're hoarding good data or bad data? What do you do for data quality?
When it comes to data, I rely on the systems themselves, and I like to really do my own beta testing when it comes to softwares and technology, because I want to push the technology to where I know it's going to be reliable. So if I have a system that comes out, let's say for market stats, I'm going to compare it to the other data profiles and points that I use to make sure that I'm getting similar data. If it's too complicated or I'm getting discrepancies, then I'll go back to what I've been using before. So it's really important that for me anyways, is when you start implementing a new system or a new tool, that you do your work ahead of time and not just jump into it, because no one wants to have that egg on their face where they go, oh, I guess this stat is not right. And why is that? And then you have to know your market enough to know if the data is correct or incorrect. You can't rely on a system to just input and output. And I think a lot of people do that.
I think data is very important in relationships, like the one you have with your agents, because as long as the data is relatively clean and accurate, then you can actually have a conversation about the data. Yeah. It's not you're judging the way they run the business or they're judging the way you run the overall business, overall company. Yeah. It's we're looking at these, reach outs, retentions, conversions, and other KPIs. Is that something you do, that you have standard KPI decks for each agent and you have those kind of reviews with them? Is that a system you have in place?
Not necessarily for each agent because they are independent contractors, but we do have the data if they would like it. So our KPIs are more tacked to what our staff does and the transactions that we have. And so, but we do also, I like to look at our quartile report with our agents. And so with the quartile report, it's going to give us that 350 agents, but it's going to break it up into quarters about our top producing agents. So even though we have 350 agents, it could be that our top quartile is only 20 people and they're doing 80% of the business. And then our next quartile is going to probably have, I would say, another 30 to 40 people. And then the bulk of it is going to be agents that aren't really producing a lot. And so what that tells me is that I can go in and see if someone is having a good year or a bad year based on what they've done before. I can see the agents that are coming in that are on an upward trajectory that I want to maybe give some more support to and make sure that they know what they're doing, because sometimes you can grow too quickly, but also agents that you can see that are slipping and you want to reach out to them if they're having and seeing if they need extra support. And so, but also maintaining your top quartile where you've got these really powerful agents and really know their business. How am I supporting that top level agent that's doing 80% of our business? And there's only 20 people, but I've got, 325 agents that are chirping at me that don't produce as much as they do. So it's all about the balance and looking at, where can I support? Where do I need to spend my time? And what can I be doing to maybe get an agent from the third quartile or the fourth quartile up a level? How can I get them 2 more transactions? How can I get them 5 more transactions? How can I get them and support them in a way that I can help their business do more so that they're moving up and they're successful and their families are happy and they're putting more food on the table? So those are the KPIs that we look at. And then in general, some of our market stats. So we need to know what our average sales are, days on market, what our competitors are doing. I think that's extremely important. And luckily, we have a lot of data on our competitors that we can be able to access that. So we can see where we are as a brokerage versus where they are, if they're up, if we're down. Was it a good month? Was it a bad month? And then another level of KPIs that I look at is just the cyclical market. So what's happening cyclically when it comes to real estate? Because if we have a snowstorm in January, that's going to push where our spring market starts from. That's going to push it back. Or are interest rates impacting it? What are we seeing? We always know in the fall around holiday time, things are going to slow down, but are we having a robust enough spring compared to last spring? And if we're not, is that because of interest rates? Is it because of weather? Is it because of retention? Or, what's impacting these factors that could be cyclical based no matter what?
It sounds like you really understand your market, your competitors, and the data overall. I just want to come back one more time to the piece about, and you did talk about how do you get an agent to improve a little bit, yeah. And I sense it seems to be an interesting relationship because you want them to improve, but it's their business. Yeah. Um, how do you, I mean, and then going back earlier on, you talked about waves and waves of technology. Do all of those things congregate into people who struggle with digital literacy, who don't use the data, who are stuck in their ways? Yeah. Do you find there are different personas? Are they easily identifiable in your agents?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, when it comes to our quartiles, I will almost derive one person's persona into it. So if I'm thinking about my top quartile, I have one or two people that I'm thinking about how am I impacting those people. And then in my second quartile, like, okay, I've got a couple of people, how do they do their business and how can I be impactful? And same with the third and the fourth, because everybody is a lot different. And we do have agents that are in our top quartile that don't use technology. They won't use it, but they're killing it because they're relational and they've been doing it for forever and they're really good at what they do. So it's extremely important to attach a persona to your demographic, because if you don't, then how do you know that you're really appealing to your audience? You know, whether that's a client, whether it's an employee, whether it's, you know, just somebody that you're meeting on the street and talking about your business, you need to understand what their hot buttons are and what their problems are so that you can solve for it. And so, especially when it comes to, you know, helping agents achieve more. And like you said, I can't tell them to do something in their business, it's their business. But what I can do is sit down with them and have, and we're always available. I always say, like, anytime an agent wants to meet, I'm happy to sit down and talk an hour about what their business is doing. And typically every year we would do business planning meetings where my business partner and I will do one-on-ones with anybody that wants to do it. And for the size of our business and for us to have collectively about 150 meetings in a 2-month span, that's a pretty good turnover, or pretty good conversion rate of agents that we have that want to meet. And what we do in that business planning is we say, all right, here's your numbers and here's what you're doing. Show me and tell me what you want to achieve. What are your goals? How are you going to achieve those? What have you been doing that's working? What did you try? Have you thought about trying this? And how have you seen some success? And if they've had a bad year, we need to be that coaching and that mentor and positivity. And if they had a great year, we need to be their cheerleaders and tell them that. So it's all dependent and very, very unique to each person. But collectively as a group, we know that you can't be individualized and generalized at the same time, right? So when it comes to how we develop the business and the trainings that we offer, we're trying to appeal to our main demographic and what would be beneficial to them. And there's been a lot of changes in the real estate market over the last couple of years within our industry that has really, really shaken some things up. So a lot of our training has been focused on what the new legislature is and how we can use it and implement it into our businesses so that, one, there's a compliance, also making sure that, you know, the sky isn't falling. So sometimes you have to be that voice of reason, and other times you have to really pat them on the back and tell them they're doing a good job. And everybody needs all of those things all the time. It's just a matter of when does someone need something and identifying why they need it and how you can help them, instead of walking into a meeting and going, okay, here's all about me. Let me talk about me and what I've done, because that's great. But it's all about sitting across from the person and really, really understanding the differences between people's businesses that's going to make them excel.
Right. So just to close off then, let's bring it back to you a little bit more. So you've talked a lot about, I've heard lots about resilience, strength, knowing where you want to go and direction. Yeah. How would you give advice to others who face similar or different challenges in their lives or in their work to end up in the position that you're in, where you're stuck with something and you made it happen? Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you got through the hard times and what advice you would give people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of my Polaris podium is public speaking in regards to both the challenges, and I do pro bono for any grief workshops or anything. I'll speak for free. But also when it comes to single parents, whether it be that your spouse died, you're divorced, or you're just single by nature with parents or with kiddos, is there's no support out there. If you Google single parents, all you're going to get is parenting advice. And that's not necessarily what we need. We really need someone and a community of sorts to be able to say, hey, you can do this. Because the challenges of single parents trying to work their way up the ladder or trying to build a business is so much different than someone without kids or someone that has a spouse. Because if there's a sick day, you're the only one. There's nobody there. You know, when your kids have a school play and you've got a big meeting, you have to figure out how to balance both of those things without impacting one or the other. And so to give some resources to more single parents, and then also to be able to educate corporations and businesses on the needs of single parents and how hard that can be when life has adversity. I don't care if you're getting divorced or your husband is sick or your parents are needing to go into a senior living. There are challenges that are faced mentally that impacts the job that you do on a daily basis because you're thinking about your family first. And so it's twofold when it comes to talking to companies, because you want to educate them on understanding what the challenges are of big life happenings. And you want them to be able to be understanding of that, but also from another level, you want to be able to keep that productivity going. So it's an educational base on how can I support my employee so that they can be more productive at work, so that I'm not losing out on efficiencies or business because they're distracted.
Very powerful words there in terms of the challenges about people balancing their lives and their work, and in particular when there's some, as you put it, adversity. Yeah. Let's take another angle on you then. So if you talk to the 15-year-old you again, yeah, what would be the key messages you'd give them? What would you say? You need to know this now.
Oh gosh, I don't, that's a really, really tough question. I've struggled a lot with anxiety and depression. And so that I think has helped fuel my growth and my resiliency in what I've done. But I really would tell that 15-year-old to have more fun, that life is going to be stressful, but you need to take some breaks because it doesn't have to be as, the sky is falling all the time. And I still am trying to teach myself that when it comes to anxiety, but that's what I would tell anyone is we can get through the hard times, but what is the saying? Don't waste your time on future stress. The stress is going to be there, but don't spiral into what could happen, because there are so many things that could happen and life is going to throw you so many different challenges. Just one of my sayings is get up, dress up, show up. So no matter what, you got to get up in the morning, you got to dress up, and you got to show up for the people that need you.
Well, thanks very much, Leslie. I mean, you're clearly a successful business leader, and I thank you for taking the time to do this podcast. So, very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.